Hi, I'm Amanda from OCG and I'm going to be talking to you today about interviews. I think the main thing to be aware of is that interviews can be scary. I think most people feel a bit nervous about interviews, and what we want to do today is to just help you understand more about them and take away some of that mystery. Purpose of an interview. So as I mentioned before, interviews can be scary, especially if it's been a while since you've had an interview. You may not know what to expect. You may not know what's expected from you during an interview. So let's start with why we have interviews at all. Essentially, an organisation wants to find out more about the person before they take them on into the role. And there's many ways that a business can find out about a person, but essentially they want to find out if they fit the role and if they fit the skills that are needed. So they want to find out a bit about your previous jobs, what you've done in those jobs, and what you could bring to the job that you've applied for. They'll often want to know about your skills and experience, your strengths and your weaknesses, your personality, how you cope with pressure, how you communicate. I think the key thing to remember here is that it's actually a two-way street. So the interview is about the person finding out about you, but also about you finding out about them. So you can see the interview as an opportunity to ask questions, find out if it's the right role for you. So now I'm going to be talking to you about the different types of interviews. Sometimes you get a mixture of different types, but essentially it's good to know what they are. You've got screening interviews, selection interviews, and panel interviews. You've also got virtual interviews and something called a competency or behavioural interview, which we'll talk about a bit more. So first of all, screening interviews. So the purpose of a screening interview really is to screen out candidates who don't meet the job requirements. This is usually the phone call that you get to say, hi Joe, you've applied for this role. I'd love to have a talk to you a bit more about what you've done. So the key thing to remember there is focus on what you can do in that job, and generally the conversation will be quite short. So selection interviews. These interviews are really to help the business understand what you've done in your previous role. So that's usually when you've had the phone call, they ask you to come in for an interview. Sometimes it's in person. These days with the whole COVID situation, you'll sometimes find yourself in front of a computer doing a virtual interview. So that interview is really finding out a bit more about what you have actually done in your role. So for example, I've demonstrated great customer service, or I've managed a team of guards, or I have dealt with a very important security project, so that type of thing. So the next type of interview is a panel interview, and that's where there's two or more people. Generally, what will happen is there'll be one person who's sort of leading the interview and a couple of other people as well, but you may find that more than one person asks you questions. So I think the key thing there is to try and maintain eye contact with all the people that are at that interview. The next type of interview is a virtual interview. These are becoming a lot more common these days, mainly because of the COVID situation where we can't always meet face to face, and also because some recruitment is done in different cities, and it enables you to go for an interview without actually having to physically go to the premises. So they are fantastic interviews because it does allow you to interview quite easily. I think the main thing is that many people are unsure how to download the technology to do those interviews. So what we'll do is we'll provide you with some information on the website to help you with that. So a lot of these meetings are conducted via Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Google Meet. As I mentioned before, they are becoming a lot more frequent, and usually you'll be sent an email or a calendar invite from the person that you spoke to during the screening interview. So a couple of key tips: test your technology before you start. Sitting upright and eye contact into the camera. So the next last interview is the competency or behavioural interview. It sounds like a tricky word and it sounds a bit scary, but it's not scary. It's really about a company understanding what you have done in the job previously, so they know what you are likely to do if you go into their organisation. So what it does is it gets examples of what you've done so they can predict what you may do. So they might get you to give examples of certain situations you've been in, what sort of actions that you took, what the outcomes were. And the important thing is to be very specific. So key tip, prepare, prepare, prepare. I cannot emphasize that anymore. It is absolutely critical to go into one of these sorts of interviews having done your homework. Otherwise it's very, very hard to find examples when you're put on the spot, and even the most skilled interviewee will struggle to find some of those examples. So prepare, 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 and you'll get some key tips and examples of how to prepare in the next section.